Good morning, everyone, and welcome all. I'm Rebecca Friedman, and I'm the director of the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab at Florida International University. Welcome today to the very first installment of season 3 of Coffee and Conversations, discussing contemporary issues with Miami Book Fair. We first began this webinar at the start of the coronavirus pandemic and quarantine, now a lifetime ago, in order to understand how cultural institutions were handling the changes before us at that time. It seemed to us that the responsibility and power of cultural institutions had and has never been more poignant. So we turned to the long-standing pandemic of racism and anti-Blackness in this country in season 2, Cultural Institutions and Histories of Anti-Blackness. Today, we continue to engage in conversations about arts and culture in this moment. We begin season 3, a collaboration with Miami Book Fair. This collaboration involves several of the most well-known thinkers living and writing today, all of whom will be participating in the 37th Miami Book Fair between November 15th and November 22nd, 2020. And to top it off, today's season 3 guest, Candacy Taylor, author of newly released Overground Railroad, The Green Book, and the Roots of Black Travel in America, exemplifies graceful writing, beautiful storytelling. And her work forces us to see with eyes wide open the historical and contemporary institutional racism and inequities that continue to plague our society today. Candacy Taylor is an award-winning author, photographer, and cultural documentarian. She has driven more than 500,000 miles documenting American culture and has been the recipient of numerous fellowships and grant awards. Way too many to list here if we want time to talk with her. Saying we are honored to begin this season with her as our first guest is an understatement. She is joined by our wonderful deputy director, himself an award-winning author, Julio Capo Jr. So very briefly, our format is simple. The three of us will talk for about 20 minutes, and then we will take questions from the audience for the remaining 10 minutes. So at any time, you can submit a question using the Q&A chat button at the bottom of the screen. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Candacy.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor. And I'll just turn it over to my colleague to begin questions.
I'm so excited. Candacy, we have been fangirls since the minute we received this. I mean, we had been for a long time already, but this is such a readable, such a beautiful and powerful testament to so many things. Your book touches on urban life, on Black resistance, on Black leisure, on Black recreation, fighting anti-Black violence. There's just so, I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about why you chose to write this book and tell us a little bit about the book itself. It's just such a necessary work right now and always.
Yeah, that's so kind of you. Thank you. Flattered. I stumbled on the Green Book as a subject by accident. I was commissioned to write a travel guide on Route 66. It was the first time I'd been commissioned to write a book, and writing a travel guide was really hard, and it didn't pay any money. And I thought, why am I doing this? And because so many books on Route 66 had been written by 98%, really almost 100% by white males, we had a hard time. I thought there was this kind of celebration of, the good old days, and the nostalgia factor was so heavy. And when I learned that half of the counties on Route 66 were sundown towns, I was like, well, how did Black people travel? Like, how did they do it? They couldn't have been getting their kicks, on Route 66, because they had a lot of issues to handle and concerns. And then I found my first Green Book at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. I didn't know such a thing had existed. It was 2013. And then the light bulb went off, and I thought, oh, that's why I'm, that's how life happens. You get these wonderful little accidents that drop in your lap. And then I was off to the races. My stepfather, is a narrative thread in the book. And so I ran out and I called my parents and I asked them, do you know about this? Is this, did you use this? And he was raised in the Jim Crow South in Memphis, Tennessee, and he traveled a lot. And he did know about it. My mother didn't. But I was so thankful to have found this just rich territory that I'm still mining even after written the book.
Well, I wonder if, as you said that, can you tell us a little bit about how this has led to new discussions? How, you know, as you kind of mine this, one of the things I found so incredibly, as you noted already, was your method. I mean, that is the travel that was involved, these personal stories, and you write so beautifully and so elegantly that it's, I can imagine just someone just turning out, you know, looking at the back of their car and finding the chauffeur hat, and like it just being this kind of understood moment for Black folks in the U.S. South and beyond, right? That is, as they entered the U.S. South, and such a kind of known, if a little bit about your process and how you did this research and how you came about some of these stories and how it continues to live beyond the publication of it this year.
Yeah, I was, you know, it's kind of saying that, you know, you say I'm such a beautiful writer, because writing is really hard for me. It's not, it's like my least favorite thing to do, honestly. And so and my master's degree is in visual criticism. I got it almost 20 years ago, but it was specifically to take complicated themes and complex subjects and make them simple and, you know, just make them easy to digest. And so you know, I went to California College of the Arts, so I'm sure my professors are very relieved that it took, you know, because all those skills that I learned in terms of how to take deep theory and make it be something that you want to read is not easy to do. So, I mean, I did a lot of the scholarly research I got a bunch of fellowships. You know, I got the ACLS, the American Council of Learned Societies. I got the NEH, Public Scholar. I got the Schomburg Center in New York, and then the Harvard Fellowship with Henry Louis Gates. And so after doing all of that scholarly research and being in the archives and, like I said, reading stuff about, oh yeah, the Black men use chauffeurs' hats as kind of a ruse to, as a prop, really, to pretend that it wasn't their car, because it was too nice of a car, there would be backlash or some kind of consequence, or they could be convinced that you stole it. And then I would talk to my stepfather, Ron, and say, is this a thing? And he would verify it, usually with stories that happened to him. And I'd known this man since I was 12, and he never told me these stories about growing up, you know, in America as a dark-skinned Black man. So I was really, you know, just being completely overwhelmed by not just the history I was reading in the books, but the history that had been playing out in my own family that I wasn't aware of. And then once I left Harvard, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to, you know, I've been scouting these sites. I've been driving to them throughout from 2013 to about 2017. But then when I left Harvard, I thought, you know, I got the book contract and I knew I had a deadline, and I was just on the road until I finished. I mean, my things were in storage for like 3 years. I didn't even really have a home except hotels. And because I knew once I started going into these communities where Green Book sites were clustered, it was generally traditional Black neighborhoods. Once I went to these communities, I realized, you know, this is a bigger part of the story. It's not just a historical travel guide. And I needed to tell this story in the context of what is happening today in terms of police brutality and all of these disparities in our healthcare and all of these realities that government forces actually shape these communities. They didn't look like this when the Green Book was at its heyday. You know, these were vibrant communities with Black businesses and self-sufficiency and pride and all of those things. And not to say that some Black communities don't have that today, but when I'm in the South Side of Chicago and 53 people have been shot that weekend in the neighborhood that I was there, you know, I was like, this is not okay. And this is not, you know, ironically, the America that Victor Green or even Martin Luther King or any of our civil rights, you know, leaders would have ever imagined that we would be seeing today. So then it became very clear once I got back from my travels and really sat down to write the book. I rewrote the book proposal and sent it to Abrams and said, hey, you know, I know we agreed on this and I'm happy to write that book, but this is another option. And they agreed that this other option was far better, and it made it a much more difficult book to write because I had to thread all of those historical narratives with the present, and then Ron stories, and then my journey. It was a lot.
I mean, if I may, that's what makes it such an incredible read, Candacy. I mean, we're all reading so much now about history of racism, anti-Blackness. Some of us new to it, some of us have devoted our lives to it. But your narrative is so powerful precisely because of the way in which you weave the past with the present, and it kind of explodes this idea of progress, right? Of American progress, that there is no linear trajectory at all. And to me, it really is one of the most powerful reads I've done on the subject, precisely for that reason. So one of the things I wonder is what some of the kind of public's reactions have been. How has you, like this work, this I'm sure piece of yourself in many ways, has been received?
Well, it's been beyond my expectations for sure, because I was so exhausted when I turned in the manuscript. I didn't even know what I had done. I was like, I just hope it makes sense. I mean, of course I had editors and I had my agent reading it. And I had, a couple of editors actually paid to just make sure that, I don't want to be conflating history. I want to make sure this is right. Abrams is a wonderful publisher, but they publish a lot of art books. And so it was really, another challenge in terms of getting the scholarship and having that oversight that you would get from university press, making sure I factor that into this process of writing. So by the time, like I said, by the time I finished, I was like, I just want it to make sense. Yeah. And I did the best I could because, you can't step away if getting that, I mean, the writing process, revision, but having time to step away and then come back with fresh eyes, I just didn't get as many days as I would like to have, for that process. But in the end, I mean, it's, when the book came out, it was shocking. I mean, New York Times had it on their top 13 books that week, and Oprah, put it on the top 26 travel books. I can't, LA Times compared it to The Warmth of Other Suns. I mean, really, this was beyond anything I could have even dared to dream, because I know how it is. And I know no matter how good your book is, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the recognition that, you deserve. So I don't feel entitled to that. And I just feel very grateful that so many people seem to really like it.
It's deserving of that and so much more. I mean, it's just such a great read, and it's so accessible. And so I think if we can, I would love if, and also just to hear you say that writing is difficult for you. I feel all my students might have just sighed a sigh of relief or something, just to talk about writing as a process that is so powerful to hear, especially when this is the product. If we can put the slide up of Malcolm X taking a photo of Muhammad Ali, at the time Cassius Clay, in the historic Hampton House here in South Florida, since this is a Miami Book Fair and we're here in Miami, although I'm in Broward County right now in Fort Lauderdale. Here's a powerful photo, right, of this moment in the historic Hampton House, which was one of the sites, as you know, in your book, in the Green Book. I wonder if, Candacy, if you could tell us a little bit about what you think. Here's a piece of local history. It's been preserved by an incredible local preservationist, a Black woman who recently received a Bahamian descent, I should note, with deep roots in the city. The Bahamas being an incredibly important community for the building of Miami early on. In one of Miami's historic Black neighborhoods, Brownsville. If you could just tell us a little bit about the need to preserve this history. This is now a preserved space because of Dr. Enid Pinckney and so many other activists like her. Why we need these spaces today and what they tell us about, this need for the story, much like you have told us.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I don't get it very often. And it is important because the Hampton House in particular was one of those places where Dr. Martin Luther King practices I Have a Dream speech. It's where Muhammad Ali was actually came in as Cassius Clay. Malcolm X proselytized and he left as Muhammad Ali. I mean, come on, it's crazy that these things happened. And it was just the creme de la creme. I mean, it was really fabulous. Like there was a great um, restaurant in there, and the maitre d' had a gold lame jacket, and you were dressed to the nines. And there's just beautiful photographs of the Hampton House. And that's how Enid Pinckney remembered it.
Yeah.
And then it was literally fell into decline. I mean, there was a tree growing in the pool where King used to play with his, family. And it was almost as though this history didn't happen. And there are numerous other Green Book sites where incredibly equally important civil rights history happened, and they're literally just disintegrating or they're gone. So, thankfully Enid, I think she was in her 70s when she spearheaded this project. It underwent like a $10 million renovation. I mean, she was this one woman, freight train that basically made this all happen. And sure, she had a lot of help, but it was her spirit and her relentlessness that made it happen. That is a reason why. I mean, it's been restored beautifully, almost to where exactly the way it was in the 50s and the 60s, and it's just stunning. So I'm thankful that I've received a grant from the National Park Service and the National Trust to highlight and bring a spotlight on these businesses and spearhead some preservation efforts with some of these Green Book sites. And thankfully, we still have the Hampton House, and I encourage, yes, people to honor and respect these places. In the back of the book, there's a site tour where people can go to some of it's not completely every Green Book site, but there's enough in there to give you a good sampling of what is left, because we've lost about 80% of the buildings are gone, and only about less than 5% of these businesses are still operating. So, yeah.
Well, this book goes a long way to telling us the importance and the history of why we need to be preserved, why they need to be preserved. I want to ask a question about what's next, but I feel like it's a cruel question because I also just want to celebrate the work right now. But what's next for you, Candacy?
Oh, well, I mean, like I said, I'm so there's so much material. And because I had to write the book, I only had 8 months to write that book.
What? What?
Yeah, that's why I was a mad woman. I was literally out of my body with stress and just hustle.
So rest.
Yeah, what's next?
The irony of this, of the pandemic has been, I've been pretty much inside for 7 months.
Yeah.
And I don't work 16-hour days anymore. I had to really take a look at that and do some self-care.
Yeah.
But I work like 8 hours a day every day now. So that's really, really good for me. Mm-hmm. But I am, a children's book is coming out based on this book. Oh. It'll be out for ages 9 to 12, middle grade kids. That'll be out fall of 2021. So I'm finishing up the edits on that, and the photographs we've just selected for that. And I have doing a digital interactive map that I got seed money from National Geographic to do, to kind of tell the story of mapping Black social mobility in America. So it tracks everything from lynching sites to sundown towns through the lens of the Green Book, and in these communities, and what has happened, and what are these forces like urban renewal and redlining and mass incarceration, and how they've shaped the country that we try to call a free and fair society. And again, all of those themes in Overground Railroad about that pendulum of justice that never just has been a straight line, it's always swung back and forth, to really show on the ground how that happens. So I'm developing a mobile app where people can actually go to some of these communities and see layers of that history through augmented reality and virtual reality. So yeah, and I have a couple other projects too, but it's it never ends. I'm really busy.
I mean, selfishly, that makes me happy, but I also hope that you get rest. But that's
I'm more rested than I have ever been, I think, since in the last decade. Yeah, it's been good. It's I do think this pandemic is a great opportunity to just take a pause and reassess what's important. And so I really do try and have more boundaries around not working myself to death anymore. And I realize that I still get stuff done. I think I always thought I had to work 16 hours to, really do everything. And I still couldn't do everything. So I may as well work 8 hours and, things are still happening. So it's good.
Time management and planning. I mean, I feel like in some ways that's a story. I want, something you might have even learned from this research of this book. I mean, the way that people plan their lives so meticulously, thinking ahead, in ways that were most unfortunate to have to, but it also, they built so much community around this shared experience of dignity and respect. And if I could add, I know I want to go to Q&A, but if I could ask one more question, if that's all right. And I mean, it's such a necessary book for this time. It's always a necessary book to moment to tell this history. But right now, as renewed calls for with the coronavirus and the twinning pandemics, understanding the coronavirus, for example, as a manifestation of anti-Black violence and structural inequalities that make, if white America gets a cold, then Black America gets the flu, something like this. How does your story speak to Black liberation movements now? Like, how can people draw inspiration from this?
Well, I think, right when I went on like a 3.5 month book tour, and I drove over 10,000 miles, and I got back literally 3 days after it was announced as a global pandemic was my last book signing. So again, the timing was so perfect. I mean, it couldn't have been more perfect. But then I got back, and I live in Harlem, and I thought, oh, things are going to take a break now, with the book, rightfully so. I've been doing all this work. And then everything sprouted up again because they started seeing the disparities in the healthcare system and how this is, a race issue. And then George Floyd was murdered, and I had everyone calling me, mostly in tears, mostly my white liberal friends, saying, what can I do? What can I do? Mm-hmm. Or asking, informal invitations to be on boards for different companies. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't need to be on your board. I need you to have everybody in your company read Overground Railroad to understand the problem. Because as much as people want to march out in the streets, and I support that, if you don't really understand all the layers right. to this, we can't solve a problem we don't understand. And I think that's been the biggest issue is that, there's so many people who realize, yeah, racism is wrong. I want to be in a country that I feel proud to say, is basically living up to its promises. Clearly, we mostly agree that that's not happening. But then what do you do about it? And there is a small section in the back of the book, what you can do. But I thought, honestly, I've been telling mostly, my white friends, it's like, do you have a company? Do you have a rental, a house rental? Take the felony box off all your applications. There's these things that we all have access to, or power or skills in our lives that we either supply, opportunity or deny just by merely not being aware of how your system may be set up, to not encourage diversity. So I think there are things that we can all do, but we really have to understand the problem to solve it. And all those layers, I think, are really, defined in Overground Railroad. Mm-hmm. So that was my answer, just educate yourself, because changing the chokehold laws isn't going to solve this problem.
Right, not alone. Absolutely right. This is the roadmap to moving forward with equity and social justice. Thank you. Yeah,
I think that is what is, as I was trying to say, probably not that well before, but that's what's so powerful about your narrative, is the way in which it forces us to understand that these are not faddish problems, that these are not problems of this moment, but to show the interconnectedness of all the layers. And so it's really exciting to me that a lot of the projects you see moving forward are ones that will be accessible to larger audiences, right? That will kind of bring forward that idea about the layeredness, the longstandingness, the continuity of these kind of, institutional layers of injustice and racism, So I am just so excited to meet you and so excited to have this opportunity to talk with you and see what happens next. And we here at our, Humanities Lab are excited to collaborate in any way moving forward. So let me just get that out there to say to you now, because we work a lot with our community, including the Hampton House, and we would just be delighted in whatever.
Wow. Well, yes, let's stay in touch. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think we should open it up to questions, right, Rebecca? See if, and we could talk to you forever, and I would.
We're actually literally out of time. Is the
Oh my
thing.
goodness.
So I don't know what we should do about that. Maybe we should answer the questions offline, because we always promise ourselves we'll stick to our time.
That's fair.
Unless there's any last question you want to ask, clearly.
I mean, I could talk to you forever. No, I'll let you wrap up, Rebecca.
Okay, all right. So I'll just formally wrap up by saying the questions we will forward to you to answer offline, and just to give a humongous thank you for getting us started, for writing this book, for sharing this book, and for sharing your ideas with us today. And then, as our formal ending, let me just say thank you to the audience for joining us. Thank you, of course, to Julio as well for listening in and for participating. Small mention that the opening music is produced and performed by Simon Mogul, tenor saxophonist studying at the New School in New York City. And also to remind you that on Thursday, we'll be joined by Sharon Salzberg, author of Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World, another Miami Book Fair author, at 10 a.m. on Thursday. And please, everyone, mark your calendar and join us when Walter Mosley, Ilsa Calderon, Bill Nye the Science Guy, Abby Wambach, Joy Harho, Natalie Portman, Richard Ford, and many, many other thought leaders share their new work at the 37th Miami Book Fair 2020 from November 15th to 22nd. All readings, presentations, and conversations at the book fair will be free. Please visit miamibookfaironline.com for more information, or follow the book fair on Twitter and Instagram.
Do yourself a favor and read Overground Railroad.
Most importantly.
Yes, do it yourself a favor. Candacy, it was such a treat, such a treat.
That's a treat.
Anytime. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
We look forward to being in touch.
Thanks.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.